So hey, my name is Roman. I'm from Smartly. And originally I come from Siberia, from a very, very great place. So if you point right in the middle of the continent, somewhere above where Mongolia meets Kazakhstan, that's where I was born and raised. And for my whole life, I was excited with how in different cultural contexts and environments, great organizations are being born. So in the last 7 years, I worked in Moscow and St. Petersburg, where I worked with museums primarily. In San Francisco, I was working with higher education institutions and startups in education. In Tehran, Iran, I was designing in Persian and mentoring startups. And in between, I visited around 60 different countries, meeting great companies and learning how we work. And around a year ago, I moved to Helsinki to join Smartly. So before I proceed, I actually would like to ask how many of you are working in Finland? Could you just raise your hand? OK, so like 70% or 80% even. And how many of you know Smartly? Oh, nice. It's quite good taking effect that we are a B2B company. So at Smartly, we are creating a product helping the most advanced digital advertisers to improve their performance. So companies like Uber, eBay, Skyscanner use us every day to manage their digital ads and like their presence in the digital ad space. And what makes me excited about Smartly and why I joined and why I stay here is because of a very unique culture and a product development process that works here. I'd like to highlight just a couple of things. The first is the product development speed. So we are working in a very high-paced market, working now mostly with Facebook. And Facebook introduces, for example, over 100 new features for their advertisers every year. And in order to stay competitive, we need to be even faster. And that means for us in practice that we deploy code up to 10 to 20 times a day, and many UI changes go live every day as well. The second point is about self-organizing teams. So in Smartly, a lot of innovation is coming from inside the developer teams. We have a very developer-driven culture. And every developer in the company follows the feature he's creating, from getting the requirements from the customers and doing some prototyping and being involved in customer meetings. And we have salespeople coding as well sometimes, making us a full-stack team. And the third thing, I guess the most important, is being close to customers. So we oftentimes arrange customer visits here in Helsinki. We literally fly the whole paid social team of some companies here, and we have guests pretty much every month. And every development team have a chance to meet customers and learn how we use the tool and understand their pains better. And with over 600 companies using Smartly, we do not have a dedicated customer support team. So our 24-hour support is entirely sourced by our employees in 9 locations around the world who are responding to customer support chats. Everyone do it, so our managers, developers, designers, our CEO, even our lawyer, me included, we all do customer support shifts pretty much every week. And that, I believe, is one of the strongest assets that actually helps us to understand the pains of our customers and their workflows, and to ultimately also understand the product better. And with this set of values, Smartly has grown to over 100 people without having a dedicated product designer role in the company. You may wonder, how did it even work? Your UI must be just in a very critical state. But in fact, it wasn't. And it worked. Exactly because of the fact that the key priority for us has always been very close to customers, and developers were very involved in the customer validation process, and were actually following something that we would call a very rough design process, helped the company to actually have good UX. And according to our customer satisfaction reports, UX is still one of the things that customers love the most about the tool. But obviously, it couldn't last forever. So this chart shows how the amount of pull requests by our developers has been increasing in the last couple of years. In fact, it's a 50% increase since 2015. And our team has tripled over the same period of time. So now we are more than close to 200 people. And that means that we are developing more features than ever before, but at the same time, the complexity of the tool has been growing tremendously. And that's when we understood that becoming design-driven is crucial to our success and survival. But what does it take for a company with a very strong developer-driven culture to turn design-driven? As I said, at Smartly, we are full stack, so we have salespeople oftentimes coding a feature for a customer after a customer meeting, or developer being inspired meeting some customers and just coding something overnight. And we have this hacker culture that customers really love about us, especially at such scale of 200 people. And that's not something we are really ready to give up on. But if everyone in a company do coding, it means that everyone do design as well. And that is one of the biggest challenges for us and one of the defining things that define the process and the design system that will work in our case. So we took a fundamental decision that instead of building a system and a process that will help designers to align their work and communicate it to developers, instead, with multiple contributors to how the product works and looks, we want to create a system empowering everyone in a company to understand our design process, get on board, and take design decisions. Implementing our design system, the very important thing for us is that when you are a high-growing company, things are changing really fast. Maybe 50 years ago, you could design a manual that would work for generations, but it's not really, in our circumstances, it's not how companies work. We have companies changing their branding guidelines pretty much every 5 years. Processes change and markets change rapidly, and design systems are not set into stone too. I oftentimes saw how a company creates from scratch what seems like a perfect design system, but half a year into use, it starts to grow with multiple exceptions and custom components as you discover new use cases for what it was not designed, until you end up with a handful of buttons, and the system is not followed consistently anymore until the next redesign, when all of its workflows and use cases are taken into account. So that is a really big threat for us at Smartly, because though we are developing just one product, it is actually a very diverse tool set of things. So we have parts of the tool that are very data dense. So this is our actionable reporting solutions. It has like a lot of data and graphs, and you can make actions based on the data you see. And on the other end of the tool, we have something entirely different, like our video templating solution. So this thing basically allows you to create a video template and to upload some content from your Google Drive, and it will create hundreds of beautiful video ads automatically. And we needed this tool to be really simple, way simpler than any other professional editing software, because who are going to use it are actually marketers. And all of these things, they need to live in accordance to the same system. And what is more, we implemented the actionable reporting 6 months ago, and video templates we implemented 3 months ago, and we don't really know what is going to be the next thing. So now we are expanding from Facebook to other platforms like Pinterest and Google, and they have entirely different patterns of how user interacts with things. So going deeper into how we solve that problem, I'd like to go a bit into the history and think of like how design systems evolved over time. Though the concept of design system and the hype about design system is rather recent, there's a lot we can learn from already existing products. And I'd like to take operation system as an example, because the cost of architectural error when creating a structure of components in an operating system is way higher than in most of the products we develop for web, mobile, and desktop. So this is actually Cocoa framework, a structure of their components. It is basically iOS. So all of these are iOS components. If we take a look at some branch, let's see what defines the relationship between components here. So the relationship is defined by inheriting properties from a parent to a child. So UI control here defines some properties shared across all of these other components. And new components that are branched from UI control, they bring something new, inheriting the properties from a parent. So this way, instead of just having folders for your components, you kind of have a very continuous relationship, and you see a clear way of how you pivot new components from existing ones. So we adopted a similar approach, but taking the advantage of the fact that we are not an operating system, and we can make changes to our design system continuously, we didn't want to implement the whole system at once. Instead, we implemented a very, very minimal design system in a React storybook. I know many of you use it in your daily work. So that's what our developers use. It's a real-life representation of all the components that are used in the app. We mirrored it in Sketch. And in Sketch, we are free to pivot new components from the existing ones build them on top of what we already have, and we do so pretty much every week. So when we feel like we need a button that looks like a link, we are free to edit. In this document, we experiment a lot, and we build prototypes, and we do customer validation. And this document more or less gives us an idea of where we want our design system to grow in the long term. So here we are kind of not restricting ourselves with what we can implement really fast or not. And having a bit of a buffer between design and development, so between when things are designed and when we actually go live, we can experiment with using these components in different use cases and see if we actually comply to all workflows we want them to work with. And whenever we feel that the component is ready, we implement it, and it becomes part of the main system. So every developer and every designer in the company can use it. Yeah, but what is great about visualizing components this way and pivoting new components from existing ones, like basing one set of components on the other, is that it makes it very easy to experiment all the time. And if you see a branch that is rudimentary, you can just cut it from a system without doing any harm. So to summarize the ways we treat components and build our pattern library, we think that great design systems are not set into stone. Great design systems evolve together with the product, and instead of fighting the changes, we find a way to control them. We make changes continuously in the system. The new components are being born, all components die, and this way, organism, after time, starts to renew itself without any redesign. So we basically avoid redesigns by doing it this way. And the only way it can work is that if you review the system often and make sure that everything is constantly up to date. So we have this two-stepped approach. Then we experiment a lot on Sketch because the cost of error there is very small. And as soon as we are ready to make it part of a core library, we implement it in React. And React is what we can consider the main design system. So that worked for us quite well. We implemented the first pattern library. We had it in Sketch, and we had it in React. Developers were very excited about this as well. They actually started to use our design system and started to adopt our prototyping tools like Sketch, because it kind of allows you to prototype a bit faster. But have you ever tried to take your design system and just give it to developer to solve a design problem? Well, that's what we did. And we discovered ways our design system was used for which it was never designed to support. And that was the moment when we understood that many things that were obvious for us designers, in a system with multiple contributors where every single person in the company has a chance to influence the way the tool looks and works, pattern library is not enough. And that's when we started to document more the process of how we do things and how we design it smartly. The key rule is here, if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. So what we started to do is we started to write a very basic description for every component that we use. But that obviously also wasn't enough, because everyone using these components needs to take some design decisions. So we went further and started to write implementation checklists and guidelines for how to work with certain components. To make a very simple example, we describe what kinds of buttons we use it smartly, but we also help you to select the right button type for the use case you are currently designing for. In addition to this, we help you to write a short and contextual button label. We help you to combine and prioritize buttons when you have to deal with many. And we also provide some examples from the tool where similar things are already implemented, with the goal that we never want to solve the same design problem twice. So at Smarty, we are dealing with 4 years of legacy. The company is 4 years old. So some parts of the tool are better designed than the other. And whenever we implement something new, we make sure that it's documented so any other designer and any other developer working with similar problems can adopt this approach and to design better. But all these things, they still take quite a lot of design decisions that we put on developers. And that not always worked well. So the next step we took is that we try to implement our components in a way that they can have some better usability practices right out of the box. So we take some design decisions of developers. To make a very simple example, so when you are implementing a table in Smartly, we have a property to set the default sorting. We encourage you to set a default sorting, and we actually provide a guideline of how, in a particular use case, select the right column that you need to sort with. But if you don't set it for some reason, if you don't want to take this decision, if you don't have time, it will default to sort by the first column. And so by default, the table will have meaningful alphabetic order. A few other smaller examples is that we have components for specific column types. We are designing tools that need to be very optimal in how they use space. So we have a separate component, for example, for data column. So if data is following all the time with date, so if data is following all the time the same format, we make sure that the column size is adapted exactly for that. We also have other things implemented in components like truncating values automatically if they get too long. And so when you hover, you see the full value. And all things like this we try to build right inside the component. We have a similar thing is that we also have a placeholder for the empty state for any view and for any table. And you can just fill it with more contextual data, leave it as it is, and it will already work in some cases. Going a bit further into how we document our process, we started to write down also some of the usability principles that we follow in the tool. And these are not the high-level principles like clarity or consistency. These tend to be things that only designers really care about. But instead, we try to write down some of the very practical things when you can design your prototype and then take a look through a checklist and see if your design aligns with it or not. So, for example, we decided that every single action in the tool needs to have a feedback. And if some feedback takes longer than 3 seconds to appear, then we need to provide some context of what's actually happening and provide some way for user to understand what's going to happen next. So yeah, in this example, when you're creating campaigns and we send them to Facebook, it can take quite some time. So what we could do is just to tell you that, hey, no worries, it can take some time. You can actually leave the page and return here, or we will just let you know when it's complete. Of a similar principles that we document is, for example, when you're attempting to delete something that has value, we always ask for a confirmation. Or if you're working on a page where you have unsaved data and you are leaving this page, we always want to ask you if you actually want to leave and lose your changes. So that kind of things we document really well. Next, we also document tone of voice and best practices for writing UI copy, because we do not have copywriters in the app. So every single person in the company writes some feature descriptions and even support center articles that we have for any of our features. So we try to have the guidelines for how you write text in the app consistent. So we are naming the features in the same way, we are referring them in the same way, tooltips are not too long, error messages are very actionable and contextual, and that kind of things we really care about. To raise the general awareness about design in a company, we also do a lot of prototyping sessions for everyone to attend, when we actually share with developers and with managers and with sales who are interested in our design process. We share the ways we work. We share how we work with our design system and how we prototype and how we do customer validation. And we actually encourage them to try to use our design system to prototype, normally giving some home task, like take the part of the tool that you're annoyed the most, that you use the most, and try to improve it. And we actually encourage peer reviews as well. So we ask you to design something and then run to the other part of the office. And instead of demoing your design to your colleague, try to just give him the feature and let him understand by his own how it works. Yeah, and then we just review all the prototypes that we receive, and we try to make the reviews public so actually everyone can learn from it. In all the other cases, and as I said, designers are more like the owners of the direction of their design is going, but we have multiple contributors both to the design system and also to the design of the app in general. We try to make sure that all the UI changes that happen in the app, they are going through us. So we are making public reviews. We're actually using GitHub. And we encourage everyone to add designers as reviewers to all the design-related changes. And we try to make reviews also public, so like developers and everyone in the company can transparently see like all the discussions and also learn from it so we don't solve the same problems for next time. Yeah, so these are some of the things we currently experiment with. But I'm pretty sure that we are in the very beginning of our transformation to become design-driven. Design developer ratio is still quite small. We are growing it really rapidly. And our journey is 1% complete. But I'm really happy to be able to share this 1% with you today. So thank you a lot, and I'll be happy to reply to any of your questions.